Well, good afternoon. I'm going to get a little bit political, but only because, well, I mean, that's what philosophy is, right? It's a love of wisdom. It's a search for truth. I think I mentioned I've been listening to Hannah Arendt, her work, all of her published works, and she just said that in her book on totalitarianism. But, so I had someone I respect, a podcaster. He put up a little chat where he talked about being, liberal and what it's like. And I understand, I used to consider myself far left. I mean, even some of my friends called me a socialist because, right, I adored the idea that we could help each other, right? And then I chuckle because I'm Canadian and my American buddy used to make fun of me for how socialist he thought Canada was, but lo and behold, when his father passed away, they actually paid to bury him, paid for his funeral, the city that the gentleman died in. Not because he was a vet, but because he was poor and he lived in this city. That's something that I went through myself. A good friend of mine, his father passed, and I don't think his son has been able to even pay for the headstone. And that's probably 10 years. This great man has been dead and buried with no headstone. It's a tragedy. But so much of life is a tragedy. So much of life is a lack of will and apathy. Which is why when he was talking about how it seems sad if you're someone who wants to vote for change and it's the left or the right that ends up running with the ball, it's hard not to give up or to feel a loss of hope, to feel apathetic, or even worse, feel frustrated, feel helpless, even want to lash out. So this is what I wrote, and the reason why I'm a little chuffed is I just had to make a couple of changes. I've told you before, I like to play with punctuation. I use dashes and triple dots and brackets. So I only had to make a couple of changes. It ended up having 3 sentences that were hard to read, but they really weren't hard to read. It's because I had some brackets and some dashes. But no adverbs. Well, sorry, one adverb, which all I had to do was just take it out. Didn't change the sentence whatsoever. So one adverb. And I had 3. Oh, well, why am I wondering when I can just duplicate and select all, and I can go into my, oops, no, that's not what I want. I can go into my clipboard and I can grab the old one. There it is. So one adverb, which was the sentence, just had then obviously things. So just take out the obviously. Right? So then things will never change. It doesn't change. The sentence. 3 of the sentences were hard to read. One was, I don't know, but I just split both sentences up. Right? In fact, it's interesting because it makes it read more like Hemingway. In fact, the one sentence, where is it here? I just made it as simple as heck, right? So instead of having, if we leave the decisions to the professional snake oil salesman, then obviously things will never change. So that sentence was considered bad because it's a little hard to read. And then, of course, this forceful, use a more forceful verb, or in this case, I can just omit the obviously. And so what I changed it to is, if we leave the decisions to the professional snake oil salesman, period, things will never change. The reason why is the previous sentence. We must work on ourselves first, then our families, then municipal politics, and I left it ... Right? So you understand where I'm going with that. And according to the Hemingway editor, just by changing 3 sentences, by adding a period in the middle, and then removing one word, I went from originally just cold typing on the interwebs. It went from grade 6, which is not bad. That means you only have to have grade 6 to be able to read and understand what I'm trying to get at. It's 133 words. I only had 4, no, I don't call it errors, but 4 things that you could change. So after those 4 changes, grade 4, 131 words. So I dropped 2 words, made it a grade 4. So what I wrote was, charity and change begins at home. There's a joke among economists that voting is irrational. that is only because we have become apathetic fools. Voting or lottery is beneficial if we find hope and faith in our path. We must work on ourselves first, then our families, then municipal politics, ... If we leave the decisions to the professional snake oil salesman, things will never change. I do not blame politicians for doing nothing, because that pisses people off least. It is to act that is best. I blame people voting for these hollow men and blaming them when they fail to do as promised. When we hold them and ourselves to account, we may see change for the better. Keep in mind Hofstadter's law. Change happens slower than we expect it should, even longer knowing the law. And Parkinson's law, that a task will grow to fill the time allotted to it. Apathy and a lack of will is to blame, and that lies within for account. So what I mean is charity. Charity, it's a cliche, right? Charity begins at home. But again, this is a reference to charity, love, right? Interchangeable at one time in Greek, Latin to a sense, with different kinds of words for love, but understanding that this charity, this love, this empathy, this compassion, this understanding lies at the heart of what holds us together as a society, makes us feel safe, makes us feel welcomed, and allows us to feel a part of the system, right? A productive part, valued, provides us with that meaning. Hannah Arendt breaks it up into different ideas. Nietzsche simply says that we need to have a meaning, a value. Creation can be that. Schätzen, to him, it's finding meaning within the absurd. To Camus, I make the joke about The Economist. The joke is two economists standing in line. One turns to the other and says, my wife made me come to vote, because it's considered irrational, because your one vote is not going to have any sort of tangible impact. I mean, the chances that your one vote is going to change things is near impossible. The likelihood that you're going to know that your vote made a difference is even slimmer. But as an economist myself, I always found that to be, once again, a failure of the scientists or the empiricists or the people that just don't think outside of the system, outside of the box. Because the only reason why they feel that voting is irrational is because we've all become apathetic fools. Because I feel that voting or even lottery can be beneficial if it provides us hope and faith within our path. It doesn't matter the path we're following. In fact, it matters more the more challenging the path is, that you need to have more hope. And isn't Viktor Frankl who said, give me a why and I can withstand any what? This idea that hope can sustain in all. And I go on and we talk about we need to work on ourselves first. This is the heart of Kabbalah, it's the heart of Buddhism, it's the heart of Christianity, it's the heart of the human condition, the nature of self, the phenomenology of self. Lucretius called it rerum natura. The Chinese called it the Tao of humanity. It's an understanding that we are ourselves not in spite of others, but because of them. So it was absolutely impossible for us to live a life of narcissism and truly become what we are. We're living a fantasy. We are an automaton. We are a hollow person stuffed with straw, because we are not a tangible being as, who was it? I think it's Moses Maimonides. He was talking about this idea of what we truly value is not something that is impermanent. It's not something that we can touch and taste and smell. We use these ideas of sensory perception to try to get closer to the meta of existence, like something beyond ourselves. They used to call this a cult, but I don't mean to scare anybody off. I'm just saying that it is scary to realize that humanity is something more than our parts. Right? And Ken, you can take this from, I think it seems, one of the very rare few who are truly agnostic. I am not trying to disprove a higher power or even prove a higher power. I am wholly in the camp that we can't know. We are stuck in this system, so it's impossible for us to understand the nature of. Right? And I go on, I say we must work with ourselves, we must work with our families. This is the heart of the Chinese Book of Change. I've said this many times. B is the foundation of the family, of the family unit, of the household, but it also is the foundation of, the group of families, and then it broadens out from there, and it encompasses the entire world. Pluralism is commonly bandied about, but I don't like that term because it ignores the inherent value and necessity of the individual within the plurality. Right? So I talked about leaving these decisions to snake oil salesmen. Why? Because most politicians, by the time they get to a position of power where you're likely even going to be introduced to them, they've probably turned their back on their ideals, on their morals, on their ethos, on their logos up to 15 times. So think on that. Imagine if you have gone against your very morals and your ethos. If you believe that lying is inherently wrong and you are forced to lie over and over again, not only does it make the lying easier, but it denatures your very humanity. And that's what we're seeing happen here. What we need is to support the people in society that are willing to stand up for something, are willing to be counted rather than counted out. Right? Until we do this, things will never change. I don't blame politicians for doing nothing because they don't have a choice. Right? Nobody respects a politician of old who would say, I don't care that the majority of society doesn't support me. The majority is always wrong and the minority is seldom right. I'm thinking about 20 years in the future, but not based on some sort of fantasy you're living today. That's a failed religion. Right? You cannot have confidence in something that is phony, fake, or even harmful to others. It is to act that is best. So to speak on saving the planet or representing people or changing electoral style, whatever it is you promise, to act is best. I blame people voting for these hollow men and then blaming them when they fail to do as promised. Right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. When we hold them, these hollow men, these stuffed men, and ourselves to account, we may see change for the better rather than backsliding. But I warn, don't forget, and this is a bee in my own wife's bonnet, the Hofstadter's law, that change happens slower than we expect it should, even longer knowing this law, this truth. And what makes it worse is Parkinson's law. Right? It's a truth that a task, the time to complete a task, will grow to fill the time allotted it. So if we don't mandate action, if we continue to accept hollow promises, if we continue to re-elect the same hollow straw men, then who is to blame? I argue it's apathy and a lack of will to blame. And that lies within for account.